if you don't mind, I'd like to pick on Coven again, since the Knight Foundation report I'm interested in is sort of the older of the two. So there was a report that came out before you started Coven called Digital Readiness and Innovation in Museums, which is mentioned in the blog post that goes along with this talk. And some of the key takeaways that came out of that sort of snapshot of immediately pre-pandemic American museum practice, I think are sort of interesting baselines for looking at how things have gone over the course of the pandemic and hopefully through what will be the recovery from the pandemic, fingers crossed. And the Knight Foundation reports I found over the last few years have been really good at giving you really succinct summaries. You don't have to go through 60 pages of narrative in order to come away with what are the key points. And this idea that pre-pandemic, the things that were going on most in terms of digital readiness and innovation in museums were there was severely limited staffing for anything digital. Lots of places were still struggling with the idea of what their strategies were around digital engagement. Digital projects, although not exclusively digital projects, tended to be pretty siloed and very poorly tracked in terms of what their impact was, what the outcomes were, what counts as success. While on the flip side of that, leadership support for digital projects routinely rated very highly, like, yes, this is something we should do, from the highest levels of museum leadership. And then the last of the takeaways was that audience insights about digital audiences are very, very poorly integrated into how the museum does their digital business. And most of these insights are pretty shallow. Like, what does your online audience look like? Who are they? What are they doing? What do they like? What do they not like? And so if that is our January 2020 state of the field, what have you been seeing in the last year and a half, Coven, about, has this changed much? And if so, how? Like, what differences are you seeing now in museums' responses almost a year and a half into basically drop everything and figure out how to redo all of our business?
Yeah, I mean, I would say those findings still, unfortunately, for the most part, hold and are reflective of what we're seeing now. I mean, digital staffing remains pretty limited. Dedicated digital staffing remains limited. If anything, I feel that scenario is probably a little worse now than it was. Largely due to some, rather large layoff or some significant layoffs at some rather large institutions. I think on the whole, the sector has sort of lost a lot of domain specific digital expertise, that unfortunately I think we're unlikely to get back, save some sort of miracle occurring. Digital strategies still remain, I think we characterize them as emergent in the report, which basically means nobody's doing them yet.
But we talk about them.
Right, yeah. So, I think we're not, this, anecdotally at the Knight Foundation, I wouldn't say that we're seeing a significant shift in the status of those things. I think what we are seeing is quite a significant shift in the sort of awareness of the importance of these things. Or, I'm sometimes a little bit more flip about it, where I say it's like the awareness that a museum is not doing very much digitally or hasn't invested in a digital strategy. The director, when they talk to us about that in the past, it would have been like, I would characterize that as sort of like, yeah, we're not doing it. I mean, we'll get around to it, to now a feeling of tremendous guilt that they have let so many years go by without investing in that. And now feeling like, oh my gosh, we have so much catching up to do. There's barely a discussion I have with a museum director that doesn't start with, we just know how far behind we are, to which I have to say, well, you're not alone. I do sense, a groundswell of activity towards developing more digital strategies. We certainly are getting, on the arts team side here at Knight, we are getting a lot more institutions coming to us instead of saying like, hey, we want to do this flashy experimental digital project, coming to us with much more sort of foundational things like, hey, we are looking to hire staff, or we are looking to develop a digital strategy. We are looking for help in doing so. So I would say that is a positive change, if not one that necessarily we're tracking on a numerical basis yet.
Mm-hmm.